So, The Wheel of Time, Book 1, The Eye of the World, written by Robert Jordan, is obviously the first book in the 14-part Wheel of Time series, which is very intimidating. And overall, I have to say, I think this is a great book. I really enjoyed the world building, I liked the characters, I liked the magic system, I like the idea of the one power, the dark one, the Aes Sedai. I like the lore behind it. I will say I do think that its biggest problem is that it's too long, just purely for the fact that there are a lot of segments in this book where I'm like, you can shorten this, you can get rid of this is pointless, like I get it. And for me, that thought was mainly prominent in the segments where it was just Matt and Rand in the wilderness running away from Dark Friends. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great scenes with Matt and Rand on the run. Like for me, I think my favorite chapter was the one called Play for Your Supper. I really love that chapter. I love it when Matt and Rand go to the farm and the farmer lets them stay for the night, and then the farmer's daughter has this crush on Rand, and Rand just like is playing the flute or whatever, and then like you can tell that the farmer's daughter is like super into him, and Rand's just like, oh, she's kind of cute. But also, it's kind of awkward because I need to stay here, and if, you know, the farmer catches me with his daughter, like, can't do that. But also Rand is thinking she isn't Egwene, so nah, I'm good. And then like I like how the farmer's wife is just like, yeah, no, they can't sleep in the same room, so we're gonna have the daughter go and sleep with us, and Matt and Rand can go sleep in her room, which I thought was really fun. It was probably the chapter where I really enjoyed Robert Jordan's writing style. I really liked the atmosphere of these whimsy country boys out in the wilderness having to fend for themselves, and so they go and visit other people, and you get the nice farmers who let them stay. I really liked that stuff. But then there are other times like when they get into the cart and then they get chased by dark friends, or they go and sit down into a tavern and then again they get chased by dark friends, and it's like, I get it, you've done this about 3 or 4 times now, Robert Jordan, you can tone it down. I just realized that I skipped really far ahead into the book. So going back to the beginning, I really liked the prologue to this book, though I will say as a first time reader I did find it confusing initially. I would say I've read this book about 1 and a bit times. Mainly, I listened to the Rosamund Pike audiobook all the way through, which technically counts as reading. But because everyone was like, you have to listen to the Michael K. McKay reading version, you have to, I was like, okay, fine. So I got it with one of my credits. I listened to it, and immediately I was like, hold on, why is the audio quality so good on this when the sample was really poor? Like, that confused the hell out of me for a second. And then I was listening to the prologue, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I understand why people say Michael Kramer and Kate Redding are legends in the audiobook community, specifically because of their narrations, because yeah, Michael Kramer's cadence and the way he reads the story is very theatrical, but also calm and soothing, but also you can feel the darkness and the atmosphere of the prologue. And I will say, listening to the prologue twice definitely helped me understand it a little bit more. I still feel like I don't understand the subtleties of the nature of the Wheel of Time, because apparently the further you get onto the series, and then when you start revisiting the earlier books again, you catch more of the subtle nuances and the detail, which I find interesting. And so I have a feeling that if I'm able to finish the Wheel of Time series and then revisit the opening to Eye of the World, I will look at it with a whole different perspective, which to me is really exciting and interesting. I love it when you can do that with books. Like, I love that with Harry Potter. I love that with Dune. I don't get it as much with The Lord of the Rings, but I still find it really interesting when you just go back and you find a subtle nuance and you're like, oh, that detail is really cool. I never picked up on that before. Like, those kind of moments of discovery to me are just so cool. I mean, the main gist of the prologue is that Lews Therin, who was the dragon before, spoilers, even though it's really obvious, Rand al'Thor, is essentially in the midst of a battle, and then he goes into the palace and tries looking for his wife, but finds out that his wife and entire family is dead, and that's because he's gone crazy and he's killed them, and that is revealed by one of the Forsaken Shamael, who appears to him being like, Lews Therin, Kinslayer, you have killed them all. And so, Lews Therin, absolutely, you know, mortified and horrified at what he's done, and with all his grief and anger and insanity, basically uses the last of his Saiyadin to channel and essentially create Dragonmount, killing himself in the process, which I think is a really interesting way to open the book. It essentially goes, yeah, the dragon before, the current dragon, messed up so badly he broke the world and killed all of his entire family, which is a great twist in itself. It really just set the precedence of this book series, although not explicitly, you know, made for adults, can get quite dark, which I thought was really cool. And then when we get into the beginning of the story and we meet Rand al'Thor and his father, Tam al'Thor, and them going to deliver the food to the Two Rivers for the Winter Night Festival, and then along the way they come across the Fade, and Rand's like, oh my god, there's this thing chasing us, Dad. I really just like the way Robert Jordan built the atmosphere in that scene. It's, oh yeah, little country guys are walking down the forest road, and oh god, there's this dark, supernatural thing that is coming to invade the peace. What the hell? Oh, okay, he is gone. La 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 la, but secretly in the back of their minds are like, oh, something bad might be happening. And the relationship between Rand and his father is great. Like, Tam Thor is a great dad to Rand, and Rand loves his father so much. It's so cool. And then we get to the Two Rivers village and we meet the Emmonsfield Five. I think you got Rand, Mat, Perrin, Egwene, and Nynaeve. I will say, in terms of characters, I liked all the characters in the book, but I will not say all the characters are fully fleshed out. Like, for me, Perrin is fine, but the most he does is discover that he's a wolf brother, and other than that, to me, he comes across as, like, the more slower one. Like, I wouldn't say he's stupid, he just seems more quiet and stoic and a bit slow. The way most people tend to read stuff about Perrin is that he's quite slow, and this is how Perrin talks. He's clearly not the most stupid one out of the five, because, I mean, that clearly belongs to Matt, and to be honest, I really liked Matt as a character. People are like, Matt isn't that great of a character until about book 4, but I liked how kind of dumb and stupid Matt was in the book, and he pays the price for being dumb and stupid. Egwene is essentially Rand's love interest. I mean, she gets a little bit of personality where she is very much her own person. She wants to go out and explore the world. She's sick of being stuck in the Two Rivers, and she wants to become an Aes Sedai. I'm assuming there is more for her to do in the future books, but as of right now, in the Eye of the World, she is a good character. And I really did like Nynaeve. She's essentially like the older sister of the group, which I thought was really cool because she was the one out of the 5 that was an adult and was like, I have to look after these kids because they are stupid and they need help. But also, you can tell that she has her own struggles, her own worries, but also she is a fierce character. Like, eventually when she starts to channel, she channels because she is angry. That's what I know of. I don't think they mention that in this one. Or maybe they do. I'm going to be transparent here. I do know a couple of little details about the later books, but I don't know anything explicitly. But at least in terms of the Eye of the World, I did like Nynaeve as a character. I do think her relationship with Lan is fine. I do not think it is the best written thing ever. It's essentially just, strong stoic man runs into a fierce, feisty young woman who wants to be independent and tough, but then eventually falls for the big stoic man. And the big stoic man is like, I love you, but I can't really be with you because you have to go be an Aes Sedai. And I know a lot of Wheel of Time fans really love the dialogue to where he's like to Nynaeve, I will hate the man who loves you and I will love him because he makes you happy or whatever. Like, that speech is fine, but it does feel a bit corny. But Lan is cool, though. I do like Lan as a character. I like the fact that he is just this stoic, badass blade master. I do like the bits when they're traveling and Lan starts teaching Rand how to use the Heron Mark sword, and he's just like, careful, sheep herder. This is no, toy. It's a blade. You don't want to chop yourself up. I'm not going to teach you to be able to be a blade master, but I can stop you from, like, chopping something off. I think that's really cool, and Lan is really cool. But I will not say he's my favorite, mainly just because he is kind of just stuck in this archetype of big stoic man that is a badass, which is cool, but also that doesn't justify him being, like, a favorite of mine. But I will say, I do really love Moraine. I think Moraine is a really cool character. She's probably, like, my second or third favorite character in the series so far. Just because she's essentially female Dumbledore. Like, she has that thing of, she knows about things that she shouldn't, or she has theories about things that she shouldn't. She is the powerful magic user who is essentially the mentor to all of them. She has this thing where she has plots within plots. Like, kind of what Dumbledore does. Like, she gives Rand, Perrin, and Mat both the silver coin because she knows that one of the 3 of them is going to be the dragon, and so she can't lose them, so she gives them a magical coin that she can trace. It's the fact that she is essentially the big, powerful mental figure that is very scheming, but also will do what is required. I liked Moraine a lot as a character. My favorite character was Rand, and I know this is the most, like, plain and basic answer. I'm sorry, I just have a thing for, like, the main characters of the story being my favorites. Like, my favorite character in Harry Potter is Harry. My favorite character in Game of Thrones is Jon Snow. My favorite character in The Lord of the Rings is technically Aragorn. I mean, is Aragorn the hero of The Lord of the Rings? I don't know. My favorite character in The Hobbit is Bilbo Baggins. My favorite character in Percy Jackson is Percy Jackson. I'm just a stickler for the main character, and that's mainly because we essentially see the story through the main character's perspective. And I really liked Rand as a character because he was just this young kid who was so used to this country life. He wanted to go home, but is then thrust upon this mission that he didn't really want to go on. And then about halfway through the mission, he's kind of like, I don't really want to do this. I just want to go back home. But then after realizing the severity of the situation and them getting separated from Moraine and Egwene and Perrin at Shadar Logoth, Rand essentially goes, oh, this is important. We actually have to do this. And then getting to where we find Rand at the end of the book, where he finds out that he is the Dragon Reborn, and he's like, oh crap, my life is like so screwed. Like, my life is gonna just get 1,000 times more difficult because I am essentially the person that can either make or break the world. Like, to me, I really like that. I think that is really cool. And I will say, I really like the flaws of Rand. Like, he is very uncultured in some ways, and he's very inexperienced in some ways. Like, whenever he hangs out with Egwene, he's like, oh my god, wow, Egwene, she's so pretty. I love her. But then he will never do the right thing. He'll end up saying something stupid, or he just won't act on something. And I found that to be really relatable. Plus, also, he just has a really cool sword, and I love it when the main character in a fantasy story gets a cool sword, because swords are awesome, and the Heron Mark sword is so cool. The way I've seen it depicted on the book covers and some fan art, it looks so great, and the fact that the show turns it into a katana, to me, is just an absolute travesty. Like, the Heron Mark sword is a beautiful looking sword in the renditions and the book covers and the fan art, and they just turned it into a katana. Like, ugh. Now, aside from the main Rand story, there are moments where the characters do get separated at Shadar Logoth, and so we end up following Perrin and Egwene. Nynaeve goes on her own separate ways, but then meets up with Moraine and Lan, and those bits are fine. I think the Perrin and Egwene subplot is kind of interesting at times. Like, Perrin has this wolf brother thing where he can, like, communicate with wolves, which is interesting, but isn't fully fleshed out in the Eye of the World. It's like, he runs into, is it Elias? Who starts teaching Perrin things like, oh, he can communicate with wolves, but then they get captured by White Cloaks, and then the White Cloaks are interrogating them, and then one of them kills a wolf, and then Perrin goes crazy, and then gets a wolf to kill one of the White Cloaks, and then they're about to get executed until Moraine, Lan, and Nynaeve go in to save them. And that subplot was fine. It wasn't the most thrilling or anything, but it was fine. Egwene and Perrin also do run into the Tinkers, which was okay. It wasn't that bad. I do think Perrin's POV is interesting at times, and there is a thing that Robert Jordan does between all the male characters. Like, whenever you jump into their heads, it's quite interesting. Like, I really do like it when Perrin's like, oh man, I wish I could talk to this girl and tell her how pretty he was. Man, if Rand was here, he'd be able to do that. He's great at that kind of thing. Now, a thing that I do find interesting is that when Aram is flirting with Egwene, Perrin gets jealous, and you can read that moment in two separate ways. One is Perrin going, hey, Egwene, what are you doing? You're meant to be with Rand, aren't you? Like, Perrin is sticking up for his boy Rand. But then you can also read it as Perrin is slightly jealous with Egwene dancing with another guy, and Perrin is jealous because he has a crush on Egwene. So, if anything, there was potentially precedence for the show to play with the Perrin and Egwene friendship and make it sort of a relationship. But the show does it in such a weird way where they give Perrin a wife and then Perrin kills his wife and then Perrin has this crush on Egwene, but then, like, it's a mess. I don't like that. I could see where they were potentially trying to pull that from, but I also don't know if that's the intention of the moment in the book. Because like I said earlier, to me, it does play like it's Perrin sticking up for Rand, being like, hey, you're meant to be with Rand, what are you doing? I do love the bit when they get to Caemlyn, and then Matt shuts himself into the room, and then Rand meets Loial. And Loial is a cool character.
He's just a slow giant that's really intelligent.
Which I do like, I think that's cool. But I love the bit where they're in Caemlyn, and then Rand starts seeing Logain, like, being paraded through the streets, and then Logain looks at him, and, like, Rand just, like, freaks the fuck out, and then he falls off. I think he's either sitting on a wall or he's sitting in a tree, but he falls off the tree and ends up falling into the Queen Morghase's palace. He runs into Elaine and her brother, and then the guards come after them, and then Rand is taken before Queen Morghase and is interrogated, and it's really interesting because she's like, you're from the Two Rivers, but you don't look anything like a member of the Two Rivers. And he's like, yeah, because my mum wasn't from the Two Rivers. And there's this whole sort of mystery and atmosphere built up of, okay, Rand is more than he is supposed to be. I mean, I think it's meant to be a double meaning, I think, in the sense of, like, Rand is more than he's supposed to be because he is the Dragon Reborn, but also there is another layer of mystery to Rand, which I think is interesting. I mean, I could be overthinking it, but I don't think I'm wrong. But one of the reasons why I really liked that sequence was because Robert Jordan is so good at adding character to places. Like, Caemlyn felt lived in, and then Rand meeting the Queen of Caemlyn, it felt organic. It felt like they were tangible, which was really cool. And especially Elaine, like how Elaine sort of has a crush on Rand, which again, I really like. I just like the way Robert Jordan writes places and people and the way they interact. Like when they're in Baerlon at the beginning of the book, I like how when Rand runs into Min, Min is very much attracted to Rand, but also Min is just weird. Like she's like the Luna Lovegood, I would say, to where she can see all these things about Rand and ends up telling him, yeah, you and Egwene aren't getting together because I can see elements of the future. But then also you can tell that she likes him, and Rand's kind of just like, you're weird, I'm good, bye. I find that so cool, like just these little personality quirks, and it makes the relationships feel organic. And speaking of the mystery of who the Dragon Reborn is or whatever, I mean, the book doesn't play it up as a mystery because, I mean, right from the get-go, you can pretty much tell it's Rand. I mean, you read the sequence of the Winter Night attack in Emond's Field and Tam getting attacked by the Trolloc and then wounded, and then Rand carries him back to the village, and then Tam is just muttering deliriously and accidentally slips up and says that Rand isn't his son. It's really good stuff because not only does it tell us, hey, there is more to Rand than meets the eye, but also everything Rand believed in isn't real, and you feel it because we see it through Rand's perspective. It's a really good delivery of that bit of information, and it helps to explain things like Rand's different appearance to the people of Emond's Field, how that Rand is really tall and he's got red hair, which everyone in Emond's Field doesn't have. Everyone in Emond's Field has darker, curlier hair, and Rand is very much tall and red-headed. I liked that. It showed that there is more to Rand than meets the eye. And speaking of the eye, I know a lot of Wheel of Time fans, when they talk about the Eye of the World, they go, the ending isn't that great. It's a little weak. It's a little bit contrived. But to me, I quite liked the ending. I'd say my biggest problem is that there doesn't seem to be a ticking clock. They sort of go to the Eye of the World just because there wasn't enough urgency, like, guys, we have to get to the Eye of the World by this point, because if we don't, blah 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 is gonna happen. It very much just felt like Moraine going, okay, yep, we're going to the Eye of the World just because one of you, whoever's the dragon, you have to go and strengthen the seal that keeps the Dark One in his prison. And I don't know, that to me just felt a little bit weird. It didn't really click with me. But other than that, I really liked the climax of the book when, you know, they get to Tar Valon, they go through the Blight, and then they run into the Green Man, who is essentially Swamp Thing or like Treebeard, and he's just like, oh, I will take you to the Eye of the World. It's also important to note that Loyal is actually the one who helps them find the Green Man, and so he actually serves a purpose of being in the book, unlike in the show where he is just there. And then they get to the Eye of the World and they see the Pool of Saidin, and then they get attacked by the two Forsaken, Balthamel and Agenor, and that's when, to me, the action really kicked off and was really cool. Like, you have the Green Man, you know, killing Balthamel, and then you have Moraine also attacking the Forsaken, but then the Green Man is killed by Agenor, and then Agenor essentially just wipes them all out. He's just like, yep, Moraine, you're done. Lan, you're done. Egwene, you're done. Nynaeve, you're done. Perrin, Mat, who get out of here. And essentially just leaves him and Rand fighting over the Pool of Saidin. There's essentially a tug of war going on of who is taking control of the power. And then Rand essentially has his Thor Ragnarok moment, like his eyes light up, and he starts channeling all the power from the Eye of the World. And because he has absorbed so much power, he just goes, like, into God mode. He starts teleporting all over the place. He starts shooting out electricity. He essentially wins the battle at Tarwin Gap just because he teleports there and then blows up all the Trollocs and the Fades, and then again keeps teleporting and just going crazy. He then teleports back and faces off against Agenor on top of a hill, and, like, he channels the electricity through the Heramark's sword and kills Agenor, and then he passes out and has all these dreams with Baalzamon, and Baalzamon, the Dark One, is essentially just like, ah, you are mine, dragon, you're gonna die, ah. And then Rand wakes up and he's just like, oh my god, I did it, I won, we killed Shaitan. Okay, speaking of Shaitan, I find it amusing how in some elements of literature, to make it seem more fantastical, they start using Islamic phrases. Like in Dune, like, you know, they very much take the Fremen, who are essentially based off Middle Eastern cultures, and put that into the Fremen culture. And you have things like the jihad and all that. And in this book, they call, like, the devil Shaitan, because in Arabic, Shaitan means the devil. I just find that interesting. Like, oh, we have to make it sound foreign, so let's just take it from Arabic. But then Baalzamon is just like, no, Randall Thor, I'm still here. You thought you have defeated me? No. And he starts taunting him with visions of Tam and his mother. And then Rand wakes up, and then Moraine and Egwene and Nynaeve come to him being like, oh my god, you're the Dragon Reborn, what the hell? And then Rand's just like, please don't tell anyone. And they're like, no, no one needs to know except for Lan, because Lan will know because Moraine knows, because the Warder and the Aes Sedai are tied together. And then they meet up with Loial, Mat, and Perrin again, and so the whole group is reunited. And then they find the Horn of Valir, which is essentially, from what I have gathered, is the MacGuffin of Book 2. Which is essentially you blow that horn and then all the heroes of old will return and fight for the side of whoever blew the horn. So I mean, right there, Robert Jordan has set up a sequel, which I thought was cool. And then you get to the last scene where it's Rand training with Lan, and then Egwene comes over, and then Egwene and Rand talk for a bit, and then Rand is pretty much like, Egwene, I'm going. Like, I don't ever want to touch the One Power again. I don't want to, like, be involved in all of this. I just want to get away because I don't want this responsibility. And then Moraine is looking over them and is just like, the dragon is reborn. And it's a cool ending. I do like the ending to Eye of the World. Even Brandon Sanderson was just like, yeah, the ending's not that great because it just seems kind of forced and like, you just did a Deus Ex Machina. I don't feel like that. To me, it felt like Robert Jordan was building up to something. It was, we're finally going to pay off the idea of Rand is someone important, Rand is the Dragon Reborn, and not only that, he's also going to live up to his name of Rand al'Thor, and is going to channel lightning like Thor, the God of Thunder, which I thought was really cool. I mean, is it a bit of a Deus Ex Machina? Yeah, kind of, but also, it's not as bad as I've heard people make it out to be. Like, I've heard people just going like, yeah, it's a good book, the ending's kind of weak. I don't think the ending is weak. I liked the action stuff. I thought it was cool. And overall, I liked the Eye of the World. I liked how the places just felt lived in. I liked how the people in the Two Rivers felt like a little village community that knew each other and respected one another. And they had their quarrels and they had their loves and they had their strifes. I liked that. I liked how the world felt fleshed out and real. I liked Rand as the main character. I liked the mythology of the Eye of the World. I think The Eye of the World is a good introduction to the Wheel of Time series. Is The Eye of the World the best fantasy book I've ever read? No. And I mean, I didn't expect it to be, but I do think it is a good introductory book to the Wheel of Time series. Like, I liked it as a beginning of a series. So this is essentially the end of my book review of The Eye of the World, but I do want to spend a little bit of time comparing the book to the show, and why I think the show just doesn't work compared to the book. And so, getting into it, the reason why I think that The Eye of the World, the book, works better than the show does is purely because the book was progressing to something and wasn't padding out things. The show, to me, failed as an adaptation because it didn't adapt the proper plot points. It just started to either take things from later books that had no real relevance into the main story of Season 1, but it also didn't take the main character of the Eye of the World, who is Rand, and do his character arc justice, essentially going, this is a young country boy who becomes essentially the savior or the destroyer of the entire world. One of the main lessons I was taught in my screenwriting classes was, whose story is it? And for me, the Eye of the World story is very clearly Rand al'Thor's. In the show, it's maybe Moraine's. You could, like, potentially argue Rand, but not really, like, because Rand only becomes the main character by the end of the show. So, maybe Moraine, even then, Egwene, Nynaeve. That just doesn't make any sense to me. If the book clearly goes, Rand al'Thor is your main character, then the show's main character should be Rand al'Thor. But it isn't. But also, the overall character development and the plot for The Eye of the World is just better than in the show. If you try to tell me what was the Two Rivers like, I was like, yeah, generic fantasy village. But in the book, it felt lived in. You have people like Mistress Alvir, you have the mayor, who is Egwene's father. You get Nynaeve being the wisdom of the village and people going, she's a bit too young to be a wisdom. I mean, Tom Merrilin is almost a completely different character in the book than he is in the show, because in the book, he almost felt like Hugh Jackman as P.T. Barnum in The Greatest Showman. Like, he felt very flamboyant. He was an entertainer. He was a gleeman. It's in his name. He's there to entertain and make people smile. But the show makes him sort of like a rock star, like emo cowboy kind of thing. And whilst they do capture elements of Tom that I do think is in the book, like, Tom in the books does feel very street smart. He feels very much aware of the world. He's very knowledgeable in that regards. He does feel like Aragorn in Fellowship of the Ring when he meets the hobbits in Bree. But there is also a sense of flamboyance and showmanship that the show version doesn't have. The show also just doesn't have the same playful nature that the book can have at times. Like I mentioned earlier, there are elements of the world building in the Wheel of Time that feels very playful. A lot of the interactions Rand has with certain characters, there is a sense of fun and playfulness with their interactions, but the show either plays it too straight or just cuts out all the fun interactions altogether. And not to mention, the finale of the show is just bad. Like, you read the stuff that happens in the book, and I mean, not only does the show take away all of the cool lightning stuff that Rand is supposed to do and give it to this random channeler from Faldara, but also Rand just feels so passive in the finale. It's like, oh, he's stuck in the dream world with Baalzamon. I don't even know. Like, the show tries to simplify things so much because the show doesn't give us the Forsaken like Agenor and Balthamel. It essentially just reduces it down to Baalzamon is in the Eye of the World or something, even though he's meant to be locked up in Sheol Ghul, which is just weird. But also, Rand just doesn't get anything cool to do action-wise. I mean, like I said earlier, Rand, like, full-on is charged with so much energy. He's just teleporting all over the place and is, like, destroying things. It's cool. It's meant to be badass. It's meant to be a moment of not only awe and victory, but also fear. Like, oh my god, Rand is this powerful? Like, what the hell? You're meant to fit. He is the Dragon Reborn. He can make or break the world. It's so important that we see the power Rand can do. But the show is just like, nah, we'll just do the generic stuck in a dream world thing, and then we'll give him this little MacGuffin that, you know, amplifies his powers so he can defeat the Dark One. And it's like, no. But those are my thoughts on The Eye of the World. Overall, I really do enjoy the book. I think it is great, but it is long. But those are just my thoughts on The Eye of the World. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, follow me on social media. It's all down in the description. Until we meet again, see you guys next time.